A century before George Floyd was killed, Minnesota's progressive image suffered another stain. The lynchings of 3 black circus workers at the hands of an angry mob in Duluth.
For those who feign surprise that Minnesota could be capable of a George Floyd moment, don't. It's in our DNA, dating back exactly a century to Duluth. An angry mob broke into the city jail, dragging out 3 black men. On a streetlight pole, the mob lynched all 3. Yet no one can deny the images. In 2020, the knee on George Floyd's neck. And in 1920, the lynching, once sold as postcards.
Today, we shine light on the Duluth lynchings of 1920. This crime would shock the nation and expose a dark truth, that racial terror was not confined to the Deep South, something many Northern Americans preferred not to admit. Located on the shores of Lake Superior, Duluth, Minnesota was a booming industrial port city in the early 20th century. Between 1900 and 1920, the city's population nearly doubled, growing to around 100,000 residents. But Duluth's black community remained extremely small, with less than 500 black residents living in the entire city. Like most of America during this era, racial tensions simmered beneath the surface. Black Americans in the North, South, East, and West faced discrimination and racial hostility. Just a year earlier, the nation had experienced the Red Summer of 1919, a period marked by dozens of race riots and violent attacks on black communities. White supremacist violence was at an all-time high, and in the summer of 1920, that deep-rooted hatred would once again explode. On June 14, 1920, the traveling John Robinson Circus arrived in Duluth, Minnesota for a free parade and a one-night performance. Among the workers were dozens of black laborers responsible for physical demanding work like setting up tents, handling heavy equipment, and cooking. 23-year-old Elmer Jackson from Missouri, Elias Clayton, about 23 years old, from Virginia, and Isaac McGhie, about 20 years old, also from Virginia, were part of the crew that traveled from city to city, helping the circus operate behind the scenes. Like many victims during this era, little is known or documented about their personal lives. On the evening of June 14, 1920, 2 white teenagers, 19-year-old Irene Tusken and her friend 18-year-old James Sullivan, attended the circus. After the show ended, the pair walked behind the circus big top, where laborers were dismantling tents and loading equipment in preparation for the circus to leave Duluth. What happened next remains unclear, but at around 2 a.m. on June 15, 1920, several hours after the circus had ended, James told his father that 6 black circus workers had forced him and Irene at gunpoint to a designated area, robbed them, and sexually assaulted Irene. James' father immediately contacted the Duluth Police Department. Interestingly, Irene told her parents nothing about an assault or any other incident when she returned home that night, but she went along with James's story. That same morning, Duluth Police Chief John Murphy ordered the circus workers to round up. Nearly 150 black laborers were lined up near the train tracks while Irene and James attempted to identify their attackers. 6 men were arrested and taken to Duluth City Jail at the corner of 2nd Avenue and Superior Street. Deciding to make more arrests, Chief Murphy then followed the circus to its next stop and arrested 10 additional workers. Meanwhile, Irene was being examined by Dr. David Graham, a family physician. His findings told a very different story. He reported no evidence of physical or sexual assault. Despite the lack of evidence, rumors were already spreading throughout Duluth. By the evening of June 15th, thousands of angry white residents had gathered outside the jail, and the situation was spiraling out of control. The mob began throwing bricks, using iron rails and wooden poles to smash doors and break windows, demanding the prisoners be handed over. Public Safety Commissioner William F. Murdian and Chief Murphy left orders for the officers on duty not to use their firearms against the mob. This was an order that would be fatal. Lieutenant Edward Barber and Reverend William J. Powers struggled to hold the crowd back and attempted to plead with the mob, begging them to allow the accused men to stand trial. But without authorization to use force, their efforts were futile. The mob overpowered them and forced their way into the jail. Although the angry white mob numbered in thousands, they were only able to break open 3 of the jail cells. Those cells belonged to Isaac McGhie, Elmer Jackson, and Elias Clayton. The young black men were then dragged out into the street. Once they were outside the city jail, the mob held what witnesses later described as a kangaroo court, which is defined as a mock trial that ignored all standards of law and justice. Within minutes, the 3 men were declared guilty. The 3 young men were then beaten by the mob.
It was June 15th, 1920. A mob seeking revenge stormed the Duluth Police Department and grabbed 3 black men. They hanged them from a street lamp.
Isaac McGhie was the first to be hanged, then Elmer Jackson, and Elias Clayton was last, approximately 1 minute from the Duluth City Jail, while thousands of the Duluth community watched. Some members of the mob even posed for photographs beside their lifeless bodies. Those photographs were later turned into postcards and sold as souvenirs. Meanwhile, the remaining black prisoners were moved to nearby facilities for their protection. The following morning, the Minnesota National Guard arrived in Duluth to secure the area. Even though many people almost immediately questioned James's moral character and truthfulness of his story, some would later note that the accounts given by James and Irene lacked any basis of common sense. Yet still, many white residents chose to go along with the accusation, while others remained silent. The lynching shocked the nation. Many Americans were stunned that such racial violence had occurred in a northern state like Minnesota.
Many people had no idea there was a lynching. We could clear our soul by believing those happened in the southern states, and we were progressive and enlightened northerners. While 60 years later, we were lynching black men without trial and without conscience.
But for black Americans, the violence was not surprising. Lynching had long been used across the United States as a tool of racial terror. In the weeks that followed, a grand jury indicted 37 white men connected to the mob, but only 8 were tried. 18-year-old Coral Hammerberg was convicted of instigating a riot, while Louis Dundino, 38 years old, and Gilbert Stevenson, 34 years old, were convicted of rioting. Each of the men served less than 15 months in prison. The rest of the men were acquitted, and no one was ever convicted of murder. Many in the community expressed no regret. 2 of the other black workers that had been arrested were eventually brought to trial. The first defendant was William Miller. He was represented by attorney Charles Scrutcheon, who was hired by the NAACP. Thanks to his defense, William was acquitted in 1921. But the second defendant, 21-year-old Max Mason, who was also represented by attorneys appointed by the NAACP, faced a different outcome. During the trial, Dr. David Graham testified that when he examined Irene in the early morning hours of June 15th, his medical examination revealed no signs of trauma, assault, or vaginal infection. He also testified that he relayed this information to a detective that same morning. Then Dr. William Coventry would testify that when he examined Irene on July 10th, almost 4 weeks after the alleged assault, She had what he described as profuse vaginal discharge. He claimed she tested positive for a gonorrheal infection. Dr. Coventry then testified that his associate, Dr. Nicholson, examined Max Mason and the other black men who had been arrested. According to Dr. Nicholson, Max told him he believed he had a sexual disease but had not received treatment. Dr. Nicholson then testified that he examined Max and concluded that he tested positive for gonorrhea. Prosecutors would use this claim to create what they described as a circumstantial link, suggesting that Irene Tusken's infection had been transmitted by Max Mason during the alleged assault. But Max and his defense team strongly disputed that testimony. Taking the stand in his own defense, Max denied telling Dr. Nicholson that he believed he had an STD. He stated that initially he had refused to even be examined by Dr. Nicholson. Quote, "They have me charged with having gonorrhea at the time they examined me at the jail. I told the doctor I didn't have no gonorrhea, and he said I did, and I refused to be examined by him at that time." End quote. Max went on to say that after learning he could face penalties for refusing the medical exam, he later told Dr. Nicholson he would agree to be examined. But according to Max, no examination ever actually happened. Despite Max's testimony and the absence of any verified laboratory tests confirming the infection, as well as no physical evidence, no confirmed medical documentation, and no proof linking Max to the alleged crime, in August of 1921, an all-white jury still convicted Max Mason of sexual assault. He was sentenced to prison and sent to the Stillwater Correctional Facility in Minnesota. Max served several years before being paroled in 1925 on the condition that he leave the state of Minnesota permanently. He passed away in 1942. In 2020, Max Mason was granted the first posthumous pardon in the history of Minnesota.
Mason was sent to Stillwater prison, but over the years, advocates said the rape story and charges were a sham. Today, Mason's name was cleared.
This is 100 years overdue.
No governor or judge or even police ever cleared Mason from jail. Duluth police investigated the case and the alleged rape victim, Irene Tusken, and by a twist of fate, her great-nephew is now the police chief.
I will offer today not only is the conviction unjust, but the facts lack the basis for an arrest in the first place.
It didn't matter. Documents show a court found Mason guilty and sentenced him to prison. Mason was held in Stillwater for 5 years, clearing his name 100 years later. His advocates argue also clears the evidence that some still hold on to that there was actually a crime. It took a century to reverse the record.
Governor Walz vote in favor of granting this pardon. Mr. Max Mason's pardon is granted. Thank you.
Now, this is the first time in state history that it's ever been posthumously granted a pardon. In granting that pardon today, Governor Walz says there is a direct line from the lynchings 100 years ago in Duluth to the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis.
The charges on the remaining black men who had been arrested were eventually dismissed. This was largely due to the defense of black attorneys hired by the NAACP. All of the black workers were fired from the circus and ordered to leave Duluth immediately. For decades, many white residents avoided discussing the lynching in order to protect those involved and preserve the city's reputation. Despite the devastating consequences of their allegations, neither Irene Tusken nor James Sullivan was ever held legally accountable, and their identities were largely shielded from public scrutiny for decades. James T. Sullivan passed away in 1969 at the age of 67. Irene Tusken passed away in 1996 at the age of 94. Shortly after the lynchings, the father of Elmer Jackson attempted to sue the city of Duluth for failing to protect his son from the mob. However, the lawsuit was unsuccessful. In response to national outrage and activism led by Nellie Francis, Minnesota passed an anti-lynching law in April of 1921. Decades later, The memory of the lynching was revived by community members, and historians determined not to let the story disappear. In 2003, a memorial was unveiled in Duluth, honoring Elias Clayton, Elmer Jackson, and Isaac McGhie. More than a century later, the Duluth lynching remains one of the darkest chapters in Minnesota's history. The lynching of Elias Clayton, Elmer Jackson, and Isaac McGhie is a painful reminder of how quickly justice can disappear when hatred is driven by lies and violence. Their names were nearly forgotten, but forgetting the past makes it easier for injustice to happen again. Their stories and so many others are reminders of why history must be remembered, even the parts that makes us uncomfortable. The lynching of Elias Clayton, Elmer Jackson, and Isaac McGhie remains the only documented lynching of Black Americans in Minnesota. No story should be forgotten, no voice should go unheard. Sending my deepest condolences and prayers to the family and friends. May Elias Clayton, Elmer Jackson, Isaac McGhie, and Max Mason rest in peace. Until the next time, I'm Lock Jewel, and thank you for watching Shades of Crime. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and remember to pray. God's listening.